Welcome, everyone. My name is Michael Gibbs. I'm the founder and CEO of Go Cloud Careers, and we have a real lively discussion for you today. A discussion about a cloud architect versus a cloud engineer versus a cloud admin. And the reason we're doing this is we want to make sure that you know that you're developing the right skills. I've interviewed over 6,000 technology professionals, and it saddens me all the time when I see people work so hard, study so hard, and they end up learning the wrong skills, and it affects everything. We'll talk about why the cloud architect salary is different than the cloud engineer salary. We'll talk about the true skills for the cloud architect skills and the cloud engineers. We'll talk about our cloud engineering roadmap and a cloud architect roadmap. And we'll get down and dirty into the thinking patterns that are different between a cloud architect versus a cloud engineer and a cloud admin, what we do, why we do it, why our training's different. We'll have some fun and talk about certain certifications and what they're actually teaching you. We'll talk about how we think and how we act and do our jobs and why this matters. So before we begin, and I'm excited to begin this conversation, I'm going to turn it over to our Chief Operating Officer, Chris. But before I do that, let me tell you about who's on the call and why we have this panel here. We all know I've been an architect now for 25 years. I'm one of the original Cisco certified internet experts. My number is 7417. How scary is that? I'm joined by Mark Milovanovic. He's our Chief Technology Officer. He is a networking expert as both a network engineer and a network architect. He's a CCI as well. He and I, we're going to have a little fun. We may get a little geeky today. I don't get to do it very often as a CEO, and frankly, I don't get to get too geeky as an architect either. But sometimes you put somebody like Mark and I together, it's going to get real fun. We have Alonzo Coleman, who comes from a marketing perspective. And when it comes to getting hired and when it comes to getting paid more, your brand is everything. And Alonzo's an expert at building brand. He's got 30 years in brand building, plus he's got an MBA. And of course, we got to talk about the business implications and how it affects our salary. And for that, who better than Christopher Johnson, our Chief Operating Officer, an executive with almost 15 years executive experience. He helped me run this company. He's a great strategist. And of course, he'll get down and dirty. And we love that because we love those nuts and bolts things. He also holds an MBA as long as I hold an MBA. So Chris, let me turn it over to you. You go through the housekeeping and all those things, and then we're going to have the fun of this conversation.
All right. Well, I get the most fun part of the day. Since you didn't say it, I'll say it. It's been a while since we've seen all of you here on Head in the Clouds. And just in the past 10 days, I've counted 7 cloud hires or cloud promotions that we've had within our community. And so I am excited about that. We all know that the end of the year, the beginning of the year is always like the slow part for HR. And finally, boom, out of nowhere in the past week and a half to 2 weeks, we've seen seen all that work come to fruition for several people throughout the country, throughout the world. And we've even one of the participants in our cloud engineer program that we had in the past. So, and then of course we're fresh off the heels of our annual conference that we had. That was very refreshing. I see a couple of people. I see Gwen there in the chat box. Had the pleasure of seeing Gwen at our conference there in Orlando, as well as many others. But I just wanted to share that with everybody. It's exciting news. It's always exciting. Mike just shared another one this morning, and I was like, Mike, don't share screenshots. Send me the link to the announcement so that I can go say something. But yeah, it's always fun. It's always fun. So with that in mind, let me tell everybody about a couple of things that we've got, and then I'll let Alonzo and Mark say a few things, and then we'll let Mike get up on his soapbox, because today's topic was Mike's idea. So we'll let Mike get on his soapbox pretty quickly here after everybody says a few words. And I'm probably going to get confused with Mark and Mike now. I just realized that. This is going to get fun. All right. So let's see here. And of course, if you've got any questions, so Ashish, if you've got questions, put them there in the chat box. We might bring them up in real time, or we might save them for later in the show. It just depends on how it goes. But if there's a question in the chat box, we'll definitely get to it, as long as it's related to the topic, the general consensus of the show. Don't be coming in here and asking us how to configure S3 buckets. We will not be answering those questions. But so first thing is first. I mentioned our annual conference. We just had our annual conference to celebrate our anniversary, our 3-year anniversary of our first group coaching program. And in celebration of that, we're also doing a 50% off sale site-wide on everything, from our Elite Cloud Architect program to our Enterprise Architect program to the Tech Interview program to the flagship Cloud Architect program. Whatever it is that you're interested in, there it is. In the chat box, anniversary 50 is the code for 50% off all programs, all payment plans. You can enroll in the Elite Cloud Architect program and get every single piece of training that we currently offer for less than $4,000, and monthly payment plans for a couple of $100. Like, it's mind-boggling. I don't know why I let Mike do these things, but just makes my job as the business guy a little bit more fun. The next thing, we have a completely free How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job Guide. Make sure to get that at the link in the chat box and the description. And if that wasn't enough, you can get that free resource right now and have it in your inbox within 10 minutes. And you can also sign up for our webinar on Thursday, where we'll go into more depth about how to get your first cloud architect job and answer all your questions on Zoom, off mute, in the chat box, wherever you want to ask us questions. So there's 3 things that I encourage everyone to take advantage of. Free guide, free webinar, 50% off discount. That 50% off discount's going away soon. It's only for this month, anniversary month. And after that, it's gone. And we've never done a 50% off site-wide sale ever. So I'm not going to say never again, but I'm going to say we've never done it before. So that might be indicative of the future. So that's all I've got. I'm going to let Alonzo say a few words. We'll let Mark, the new guy. This is Mark. This is your first time on Head in the Clouds, I believe. So we'll let you have the last opening words. There you go.
Well, first, Mark, I'm glad to have you here. I mean, it's kind of like the 4 horsemen. We had the trifecta before, so +1 is always going to make it better. But for everyone, Alonzo Coleman, Chief Marketing Officer here in Cloud Architect, I am always astounded and excited to share all the resources and things that we can do to transform you, regardless of your background, into competent, capable cloud architects and enterprise architects. I had privilege behind the scenes to see some really great content that I can't talk about right now, but you guys are going to be very excited about what's on the horizon, about what we're doing here at Go Cloud Careers. So I'm going to keep it short. We've got lots to cover. On to you, Mark.
You guys covered it very well, but for those that don't know me, my name is Mark. Last name, I'm going to just say it. It's Milovanovic. You can spell it yourself. It's always a little bit of a handful. I've been in the networking sphere for a little bit over 10 years. And as Mike mentioned, I did earn my Cisco Certified Internet Network Expert certification. And we're going to get into a little bit of the weeds today, discussing the different type of roles, see what is needed in these roles, and hopefully between the 4 of us, and we're going to include Chris a little bit on this too, we're going to give you our perspective in regards to what is necessary at the different roles. So hopefully you all get your questions ready and enjoy the session. And I appreciate Chris, Alonzo, Mike having me on, which I believe is really my first That's in the Cloud show. So I'm excited to be here.
It absolutely is. All right. So since Mike had the idea for today's topic, we'll let Mike get up on the soapbox and run away with it.
All right, everyone. So I'll speak for a little bit. Then my team and I will talk, and then you can ask us questions. We really want to make it a great time for you. I want you to truly understand why we cloud architects are so different than cloud engineers versus cloud admins, why we need all 3. So let's first talk a little bit about what the architect does. The architect is not a hands-on position. It is a business executive position, and architects apply technology to solve business problems. So if we think about what that means, a business wants to increase sales. We architects think about how we do it. The business wants to operate in 22 more countries. We architects have to think about a plan to make that happen. The organization has increasing costs. We architects have to think about ways to take cost out of the business. So all in all, we architects are focusing on the people, the processes, and the technology. Now let's take that from the engineer. The engineer is a builder and a performance tuner, which means not only do they have to take our blueprints and actually build it, but they need to be able to optimize and tune it. And we'll get into the details of what this means in a minute. And then, of course, we have the cloud admin, and that's really a technician role. This is about doing basic things, clicking boxes on a management console, entering basic commands on a Linux machine or a router. So I want you to think about this. We're going to dive deep, a lot deeper. So the architect, because we solve business problems, it's really about our understanding of business. If an architect doesn't understand business, they can't architect anything. And I want to say that again. You know, it's funny, I saw Prasad, a principal architect over at AWS yesterday, and he talked about failing one of his first interviews. And he gave a great presentation, but he didn't talk about the business. Of course, it was a failed interview. And why was it a failed interview? Because it was an engineering presentation, no business, no architecture. So we architects have to focus on how we can solve these business problems. Does that mean re-architecting a business process? Sometimes. Does that mean obtaining new people? Sometimes. But for us, we have to understand the business, we have to understand how businesses operate, and we also have to understand how technology works under the hood. Because if we're going to put the pieces together in a recipe in terms of a design, if we don't know what it is, it's going to fall apart. Today, a bridge fell down in Maryland. It got hit by a boat and completely collapsed. If the architect designed that right, maybe a jet, 747 jet could have hit it without it collapsing, let alone a boat. So the architecture is about the design, putting the pieces together in a blueprint. You find an architect, they won't be touching the tech, they won't be coding, they won't be configuring, they won't even be allowed to by the organization. Now let's talk about that engineer. They also need to know how the technology works. You can't have a real engineer and just teach them a bunch of commands to click boxes on a management console. They need to have the judgment, they need to have the wisdom, and they have to know how to performance tune. Mark and I will give you an architect versus an engineer versus an admin role discussion later, and we're going to role play it because Mark can do all three. But we'll talk about that. But for the engineer, they need to know how it works. So think about it this way. While a technician or an admin can know how to just configure AWS S3 and be fine at that, the engineer needs to understand object storage. They need to understand metadata. They need to understand storage architecture. They may need to performance tune it. So it's a different level of understanding that that engineer needs. The architect needs to be trained. It's like flying an airplane. You're going to fly an airplane and you don't know how to fly the airplane, you crash and hit the ground. You can't learn that by doing. You got to learn theory, and then you got to be doing it in a supervised environment. The engineer, again, they got a big job. They can't just click a bunch of boxes and learn by doing, because if so, they don't learn how things work. Don't believe me? How does your web browser work? What happens when you type www.gocloudcareers.com? You've been doing it your whole life. What happens at the network level? What happens at the application level? An architect needs to understand that, and a good engineer needs to understand it too. How else can they performance tune it? Now, the admin can learn by doing. So if you ever see a learn by doing course, that will teach you how to do admin work or technician work. Here's how you make an Ethernet cable. I've never made an Ethernet cable, but I've watched people do it because I've been an architect. Here's how you click a few boxes on the AWS management console. So let's think of the implications, and obviously Chris will give you much more business implications on this. Let's talk about pay. Well, let's talk about why the cloud architect salary is so high. It's so high because the cloud architect is really about solving business problems. Now, I know architects and chief architects that earn $800,000–900,000 a year, but I'll show you today. Alonzo printed these out directly from Glassdoor. Let's make sure I got the right one over here. Let me close the other ones. So, you know, why you can see the cloud architect salary. Tyrone or Chris, if you can share this. You know, the average architect, and this is not a senior architect, this is not a principal architect, you know, isn't that range between 160 and 245? And why is that? Because of the nature of our work. It's analytical, it's planning. There's a barrier to entry. You don't just take 5 certifications and get an architect job. You don't. You got to be trained in architecture. You got to be trained in system design. You have to understand business problems. You have to understand how to solve business problems. You have to understand how to communicate, how to lead, how to sell, how to present, how to manage stakeholders. And while you've got all those businessy skills, guess what you need? The technology knowledge to know how to design these systems. So it's a rare bird. It really is. That's why companies have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of unfilled architect positions, because it's such a complicated role. Now, again, you can do it. I've got lots of people. I'll give you examples who it's taken their first job. I just had a student get his first job as a security architect, just the other day, actually a couple in the last week. But the point is, that's coming by training. Now, if we look at the engineer, you're going to see mid-pay. And again, these are analytical jobs. So if we look at the salary of a cloud engineer, we can talk about what goes into this. Note that, it's about 146 on average with 113 to 190. Why is this? Because the engineer needs to know a lot. They need to understand how these systems work, not just how to do them. They're not technicians. They're bigger than that. So if we're dealing with the network engineer, they have to understand how the routing protocols work, how to tune the routing protocols, how to optimize the routing protocols. If we're dealing with a cloud engineer, we're dealing with someone that understands cloud computing and how to make multi-cloud systems work as well. It means they understand the technology of those containers and container orchestration systems, the storage area networks like block storage, object storage, file storage. It means they know how to work around the weaknesses of block storage, because I don't care what's in your AWS Cloud Practitioner class. Block storage is very slow compared to the storage that you have in a server. So the engineer needs to know how to performance tune that. The engineer may need to know how to automate it. How can they launch 3 clouds at the same time with something like Terraform? How can they build those systems on demand? That engineer, not the architect, but that engineer is going to need to code and be able to look at that code, and whether it's a Bash shell script, whether it's a Python script, whether it's software, that engineer needs to understand it. That engineer, that cloud engineer, needs to understand APIs and systems integration, because they have to make the stuff work. We architects draw a bunch of beautiful pictures. We write a lot of business cases. We give a lot of presentations, but those engineers are the real techies, the real tech geniuses that we actually deal with. We architects have to focus on the business, because the second we take our eye off the business and focus on the tech, we lost the business. Well, how big of a problem is that? Well, 70% of all technology projects fail. It's not that the tech doesn't work. Getting the tech to work isn't that bad. They fail because they don't do anything for the business, and that's why the architect focuses on strategy and can't be touching the tech. And if they work at AWS or Azure or Cisco or IBM or Google or Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, a bank, architects are not allowed to touch the tech, but those engineers have to. They've got to build it and they've got to performance tune it. And now let's go back to that admin role. There's no barrier to entry. There really is none. All you got to do is learn how to configure a few things. Sorry, there's some AI stuff going on in my background. Mark has to help me shut the stuff down. And he's already given me some guidance, but he's got to help me with this. But that admin is doing the stuff. There's very little barrier to entry. In a solutions architect associate, they teach you how to configure stuff. They really do. So, but it's a technician job, and that's why it's a low barrier to entry. So of course it's going to have the lowest salary of the bunch. But in the end of the day, what's really going to matter is what our happiness is. But we'll look at these salaries too, because I want you to get the full picture. And I want you to understand why some jobs get you promoted, why some jobs don't, but they're all good and they're all valuable. We need people of all kinds. Society doesn't work without them. But now we look at that cloud admin, which is more of a technician role. Now you're seeing a lot different, that 96 to 164 range with an average of 125. Why? Because it's doing. There's less decision-making, very little decision-making for the cloud admin. It's just doing its technician work. So, in today's world, the technicians, enter some commands on their keyboard. In the world of yesterday, the technicians went out there and ran wires. That same kind of skill that we're dealing with, but one's now behind a desk and one's out there. I got to tell you, if you don't have somebody to create your networking cables, you've got nothing. You can't connect to the cloud. You can't reach it. So believe me, every one of these people and roles are important, but they have different potentials for your career. When you focus on the architect role, you're focusing on strategy. You can help this business save $1 billion a year in expenses. It's nothing to get $10 million from them in annual pay. If you're the engineer that can solve a business problem because you understand the technology so well and you can create a new algorithm, you can get paid fairly well for that too. Look at it this way. Any of you guys watch Netflix and gals watch Netflix? Look at the recommendation engine they have. It recommends stuff that I actually want to see. Now, when I go to Amazon Prime, it recommends things that I never seem to want to see. And they're both hosted on the same cloud. So think about how good those engineers are at Netflix to make it. When I go to the other one, I don't even know what it's kind of recommending for me, but Netflix knows that I watch John Wick, and then it's going to send me John Wick 2, and then it's going to send me Taken. It just knows how to find the movies that I like. That's engineering. Some engineer figured that out and how to do that. To me, that's the magic behind engineering. And we need engineers, and we love engineers. Now, a lot of people in today's world like to talk about learning by mistakes. Okay, now let's pretend you're an airplane pilot and you learn by mistakes. Not good, huh? Especially if you've got 500 people in the airplane. That's a problem. A physician cannot learn by making mistakes because they'll kill people. An architect is designing a strategy for a business. The architect makes a bad business strategic decision, tens of thousands of people lose their job. I want to make that clear. The architect cannot learn by doing. They cannot learn by errors. They have to have wisdom. They have to have judgment. And that's why we spend 700 hours training our architects, teaching them those business skills, those leadership skills, the information gathering so they get the right information and how the underlying technology works. Now, the engineer can learn some stuff by making mistakes. Because let's face it, Mark and I did our CCI labs. We're trying to set up this ridiculous router thing. We didn't necessarily know how to do it all, and we learned a little bit by making a mistake, using a protocol analyzer, seeing the mistakes that we made, and fixing it. But the cloud admin or the network, they can learn by making mistakes for the most part because it's just hands-on configuration. They can mock this stuff in a lab, test the configuration, and put it there because the admin is a technician, and the risk to the organization is less. That engineer makes the wrong BGP configuration in Facebook, and it's down for a day, and we've seen this. An engineer at Google did the same thing. They made a BGP misconfiguration, and Google was down for a whole day. Seriously, think about it. The whole Google Cloud down for a half of a day because of an engineering decision. Now, imagine an architect creates the wrong sales strategy for a business, and it all collapses. Tens of thousands of people lose their job. So now let's think about visibility and what that means in career advancement. I'm going to tell you all a secret. The more people see you, the greater your chances of getting hired are getting promoted are. When you do something good and you're on TV at your company and everybody sees it, a few weeks later, you got a promotion. In fact, I remember when I was at Cisco, I was on Cisco SETV, the Sales Engineers TV, talking about and teaching about service-oriented network architectures. I gave that presentation. It was seen by everybody in Cisco, and I got 3 calls afterwards. The first was one of the VPs that said, Mike, it was nice to have you in our organization. I'm going to miss you when you get your next job. And I said, what do you mean? He said, with a presentation like that, you'll no longer be here. You're going to be in a more strategic role. 3 weeks later, I was. So the architects or the designers, they get seen. They create these thought leadership things. They're presenting at conferences. They have got the most opportunities for career advancement. Just because they're customer facing, they're talking in front of you. Now let's talk about the engineer. They've got medium opportunity for advancement because we need great engineers. We do. We will always need the best of the best of the best engineers. We will. And if you're an engineer like Mark was, and you walk into an internet service provider and they're having outages and Mark can fix it, Mark's worth his weight in gold. So again, you've got opportunities. But what limits the engineer's career advancement is whether they're seen or not. So if we're talking about a sales engineer that's in front of the customer, that's helping to close deals, it's great. If we're talking about an engineer so good that they're presenting at conferences, engineers get up, they move up, their salaries go up. If we're talking about an engineer that's behind the desk writing code all day, that doesn't want to talk to people, their opportunity for advancement is very little because no one knows what you do. It's kind of like the sad statistics of who gets laid off. The people that come in the office are the least likely to get laid off versus the people that are on Zoom. The people whose cameras on are less likely to get laid off than the people whose cameras are off. Because if you see someone and you feel them and you have a relationship with them, they mean more to you. So I want you to think about that and its implications in your career. Now let's talk about certifications. And let's talk about how and where they play, because everybody wants to know about certifications. Actually, I get to so let's talk about that. So if an architect's job is to design a system to improve business performance, they're not really aligned with most of the certifications. There's a few exceptions, and I'll talk to them. The CISSP, which is a security certification, is an architect certification. And in the CISSP, They talk about evaluating the risk for the organization and understanding the financial risk. They talk about thinking about the organization's people. They think about how to create that safety inside of that organization. They talk about risk mitigation, whether it's things like transferring risk to an insurance company or designing systems to mitigate that risk. They talk about design and putting the pieces and parts together. So think about that. Think about that. And that's what they're talking about. And I want you to understand that. So the CCIE, the CCDE, which helps you understand what we do, how we do it, how we design it, kind of keep that in the back of your mind. These are there. Even TOGOF, they support what an architect does. Now let's talk about an engineering certification. The AWS Certified Solution Architect Professional. Let's talk about that. It's about building a system. Again, architects don't do it, but engineers do. The Cisco Certified Network Professional, it teaches you enough to truly understand the routing protocols, but not truly enough to design a system. And then we'll talk about admin things. Well, think about every single associate certification that's out there. The cloud practitioner, the solutions architect associate, the DevOps associate, the SysOps associate. Guess what? All junior level. And why do we say this? They're technician. If you get 50 of them, you basically went to technician school 50 times. And when I interview people, guess what? And I see that they've got 50 of these certifications. I don't take them seriously as an architect because they're focusing on their technician skills. So I want you to think about that. And let's talk about the type of work. An architect is about analysis. It's about learning and guiding and leading and communicating and managing stakeholders. An engineer is about analysis and building, and an admin is about maintenance and adding users. So kind of think about that. So we're going to have a discussion on that, but I want to address positive ideas real quick. You're trying to say that we can't get people hired with just our training. I'll give you a few examples of people that we have. And I'll also give you some examples of people that have had 20 years engineering experience that we've had to. So let's say Romanik Ivan Tambi, he came to us while he was in college. You know what his first job was after our training? The solution architect at AWS. Let's talk about Coyote. Do you know what his first tech job was? Go reach out to him on LinkedIn. I implore you to. His first job after our training was a solution architect with AWS. Guess who I got to see at our last conference? Jordan Kittico. You know what his first tech job was after our training? Was a solution architect at AWS. Let's talk about Richard Ferrara. He's a great cloud architect. He was working at a bank in a non-tech role before we trained him. Let's talk about Jeffrey Rast, who was doing geospatial imaging, which was not tech. And then we trained him. And what do you think his first job was? A solution architect over there at Callian. Or Daniel Bosu, a high school dropout who I wish was my son. I love this guy, his energy, enthusiasm, motivation. You know what his first tech job was after our training? A solution architect over at JP Morgan Chase. Or Wallace Agana, there's a video from on our YouTube channel. His last job was a sales rep. His first job was a solution architect at JP Morgan Chase. But let's talk about Jermaine Houston, who was selling landscaping gear, whose first job was a solution architect after our training. Or Jennifer Ema, who was a mental health tech, whose first job was a solution architect. Or Pierre Dassault, who was working on sailboats. I can give you examples all day. You have to have the right knowledge for the job. Now, I have cloud engineers who also have 10 years experience that come to us, and it takes us just as much time to retrain. Why? It's a different job. So I encourage you to come to the One-on-One webinars, and I encourage you to talk to some of our graduates that are having great jobs. It has nothing to do with your engineering background. It has everything to do with your architectural world. So let's get back to this concept. So Mark, have fun with me. Let me ask you a couple questions. Let's bring you on screen, and let's talk about the difference. I'm going to ask him an architecty thing. I'm going to ask him an engineering thing, and then I'm going to ask him an admin thing. So Mark, today you're functioning as a network architect. What are the design considerations and things that you would think about when selecting a routing protocol for an organization?
The first thing that I would consider is, am I connecting internal systems or am I connecting external systems? And what I mean with that is, if I'm going to be connecting my systems to other systems externally, the choice is relatively simple. 9 out of 10 times, or I'm going to say 9.9 out of 10 times, we're going to use the border gateway route protocol. because that's what it's designed. It's designed for scale and be able to take in that amount of routes. Then the next thing that I would consider, let's say I go internal. Again, back to this idea of size and scale. Depending how large my network is, I may have to run a combination of protocols. I may choose to run BGP once again, because I'll need to know as an architect that BGP is the protocol that allows me to apply policy-based routing and not just link-based routing. And it allows me to manipulate my traffic in a way that is going to suit a larger organization compared to a smaller one. I'm still going to need my interior gateway routing protocol, and that is going to be depending again on what type of topology am I running internally. If I have more of a hierarchical topology, so you're thinking like level 1, level 2, level 3, I might go with something more like OSPF. Because even though I'm not configuring OSPF as an architect, I will have to know that OSPF has hierarchy built into it through the different areas. So I might choose OSPF compared to something like EIGRP because it's going to be more designed for flat networks. If I'm running a service provider's network, guess what? I'm going to go with ISIS most likely compared to OSPF. But then this is the other thing I'm going to consider. Whatever protocols I'm running, whatever I choose, I'm going to have to keep in mind also, what is this going to cost me? It's going to cost me resources, and resources are going to cost me money. So from that perspective, I'm not going to have to put my business hat on and try to figure out what are these numbers going to be. Because if I'm running any type of protocol and my current infrastructure, so now we're going with a brownfield deployment or greenfield deployment. And if you don't know what that means, you're welcome to go look it up. You will need to know this as an architect. Then I'm going to have to figure out if my current infrastructure even supports what I'm trying to accomplish. If it does not, and I cannot tune it or work with my engineers to tune my protocols, I'm going to have to go back to the C-suite and convince them to give me more money so that I can upgrade the actual infrastructure. So that's the business perspective. And then lastly, architect is also going to be managing people. Whatever I choose to run on the inside based on a requirement, I'm going to have to think about the people that are going to be managing this, basically my operations. So now I have to try to figure out, what do these people actually know? Are they going to be comfortable working with a protocol like OSPF? Or are they going to be suited more for a protocol like EIGRP? I'm going to have to know that. If they don't know how EIGRP works and OSPF works, guess what? OSPF is probably going to be the choice if it aligns with the other requirements. And then I'm going to have to figure out, if I'm going to run this particular protocol, is it going to be too complex to manage? That's also something as an architect that you will need to keep in mind, because I'm not going to have any engineers around if I'm going to design the infrastructure in a way that nobody can manage it. And then lastly, if you really want to take it up a notch, what about regulatory compliances? That's a big thing too. Depending on what regulatory compliances I have, again, that's going to impact my upper layer decisions as well. So that will be, from an architect, just a few things that I would have to consider when picking a routing protocol.
And that's just the technical side of the architecture, let alone managing the stakeholders, responding
Correct.
to the RFIs, RFPs, RFQs, building a business case. And you can't learn any of that by being an engineer. It's just a different skill set. Now, I'm going to ask Mark an engineering question, and he's probably going to get a little geeky here. And that's okay. I want him to. Mark, let's say we've got routers that have that are running into memory and CPU limitations, and we're running OSPF. How could we conserve memory and CPU cycles? What are the things that we could do?
Okay, so let's assume that I can't do any physical upgrades. So that's already a question. Either my architect and the C-suite didn't approve my budget. It could be that the equipment doesn't have modular RAM that I can just switch out. It could be just a issue with the amount of information that my actual line cards can hold in memory, that I can actually physically write to that. The first thing I would be looking for is, as an engineer, is what processes on my equipment is causing the high utilization. So if we take, for example, OSPF, the first thing I'm going to look at is to tune my timers. That is specifically my hello timer and my dead timer. Because if I'm close to the second one second kind of hello timer, or maybe even sub-second, that's all going to go to my CPU, which is going to cause a bottleneck on my CPU. So I might decide to say, you know what? How about I don't make the hello and the dead timer function part of my convergence. What if I go with something like bidirectional forwarding, which I can run over UDP? It's going to be more lightweight, and I can do millisecond convergence, especially when it comes to my actual neighbor relationships. So I might choose something like that. The other things I can do, let's say I already tuned that and I'm still having trouble. I might take a look at how is the shortest path forwarding working? How many actual retransmissions of these data am I actually sending across the wire? So that could be a problem. So I might tune that down so that I'm not causing unnecessary spike and flooding within my area. And the same thing could also be applied to my link state database. If I'm exchanging my database in OSPF way too many times, and it's unnecessary, guess what? I'm gonna pick up my CPU usage, and I'm also gonna go into memory because somewhere all this data has to be stored. So I'm gonna look at throttling the amount of LSAs that are gonna be flooded through my area. So those are a couple of things I would look at. And then if you wanna just kind of go in between the engineer and kind of in between more the designer and the architect, I might consider if I'm running just an area 0 OSPF design, I might have to look into splitting up my area design. I might have to build in the hierarchy. I might have to say that one branch office is going to be area 1. So that's going to confine the amount of link state advertisements that can go along between all the different areas. And branch 2 can be area 2. So that way that everything has traversed through area 0, but it's going to keep some of that unnecessary flooding within those specific areas. So that's my long-winded question as an engineer, how I would tune it if I had to with a little architecture in there.
Okay, good. So in the first one, you considered the people that were there, and you considered the financial impact and the training of the ability and what they could handle. And the second one, you got down and dirty and geeky. Now, I'm going to ask you a network admin question. How do I configure OSPF from a gigabit Ethernet link and let's say put it in area 0?
All right, so I'm going to give you the slick answer. You do it through the CLI. And if that doesn't mean anything to you as an architect, that's a good thing.
It is
a very good thing. That's why they pay you. So again, as an admin, most likely all I will know is router, OSPF, a process ID. And then somebody told me that I need to enable OSPF on the links. Most likely, I really don't know what that means, but I'm going to enable OSPF. So I'm going to type in a network statement, and I'm going to type in some IP address on one of the links that I think I'm going to advertise. Then I have to work with something funky called a wildcard mask. Nobody really explained to me what a wildcard mask is for, but they told me that usually speaking, it's going to look something like 0.0.0.255. And then they told me, make sure you put the area ID behind it, which generally speaking is area 0. That's one way I would do it. Now, if I was a little long, I studied for my CCNA, I actually studied for it, and I shadowed somebody, I would understand that Cisco couldn't decide on which way I should be implementing OSPF. So then somebody tells me, hey, son, did you know you can also enable OSPF on the interface itself? And I'm going to wonder, really? How do I do it? IP OSPF area 0. Well, IP OSPF, the process ID, and then area 0. And that would be another way to enable it. Do I have to know what network type I'm using? Do I have to know, of course, what type of design I'm running on the background? No, I don't. Copy paste, but that's all you got to do.
And, I love the way you put it, and you really described it well. It's the same reason why, if a nurse wants to become a physician, they go to medical school. It's the same reason that people that have 10 and 20 years engineering experience, we have to train to think differently as an architect. And it's the reason admins need training to do different careers, because we all think differently, and that's okay. We have to remember that over 54% of all cloud architectures fail, and 70% of all technology projects, according to McKinsey, fail. And why is that? Because we got techies thinking about business when we need business people thinking about business. That's why if you talk to David Lithicum and I, we always talk about the architect being in that strategic position, that engineering being so critical to build. So let's talk about certain certifications and why they're the way they are. Some certifications are designed to create experts or people that are good enough that they don't call tech support, like the CCIE. So the CCIE has been in existence for now 25, 30 years. People take this exam every day, and there's 60,000, or basically 65,000 after the last 25 years of the certification. Why did Cisco create this? They created it for a reason. If you had a CCIE, you probably weren't going to make errors, in which case you were less likely to call tech support. And they actually liked it so much they would give their customers a service discount if they hired them. And here's why I got hired and took my first CCIE job and paid so much for it. It was at a bank. And if you're not a CCIE and you call Cisco, you get the tier 1 support. You know, is it turned on? Is there paper on it? Like a tier 1 help desk. And when they can't figure it out after an hour or more, they send you up to a level. But if you're a CCIE, when you call Cisco Tech, you avoid that first level and you already get to senior people. So the CCIE was meant to create experts. Now let's talk about certifications like the TOGAF or the CISSP, things that are not created by the vendor. They are designed to teach you something to make you more successful. TOGAF doesn't teach you architecture, but it's a methodology. Start with the business vision, not the tech. Start with the business vision, then look at the people, look at the processes, how that organization makes money, then consider the data, then consider the tech, then consider the implications. It's designed to make you think a certain way. The CISSP, how do we secure our plant? How do we secure our mobile devices? What is the organization's risk? What are the assets? Again, this is designed to teach you something in the thinking and planning for architecture jobs. Now, let's talk about those mid-level certifications like the Cisco Certified Network Professional, the Azure Solutions Architect Expert, the AWS Solutions Architect Professional. They're meant to make hands-on doers. I promise you, you will learn zero about architecture in an AWS certification. You learn the name of the service, which you can't use with your client, and you'll also learn how to configure it. Does that mean I say you shouldn't get it? No, I want you to get it because it's going to get you an interview, and then the interview you can prove to them your knowledge. And let's talk about these admin level certifications, these cloud practitioners, these AWS Solutions Architect Associate, the SysOps Associate. You know what that's designed to do? To create a very large number of technicians. A very large number of technicians. Now, there's business reasons companies would love to have a large number of technicians. And, you know, that's the key to understand the difference between them.
I wanna chime in here if you gentlemen will let me here.
Sure.
I don't want to go too negative here, but let's take a second to talk about what Mike just said here. You know, there is a benefit to AWS, Microsoft, Google, whatever vendor. We can even go with probably to some degree Cisco with like CCNAs and stuff like that. But there's an intrinsic benefit to vendors having an army of people trained on their services. So, you know, let's look at these certifications. These certifications from vendors don't necessarily train on technology. They don't train on concepts. They're not gauging concepts so much as like the CCIE is, but they're training or gauging your ability to use whatever that vendor service wants you to use. And so supply and demand. Let's just get straight down to the point. Supply and demand. The more supply there is of something, the lower the cost. So if we've got the headline from 2 years ago, I found one headline, but it's not the one that I was looking for. There was distinctly, and you can go back on our shows from 2 years ago, and I talked about this. I think the number was 60 million. Google, through Google Cloud Platform, said that they wanted to train 60 million people to use their cloud services. If it wasn't 60, it was 20. If it wasn't 20, it was 40. But still, think of that. If we're going to go on the low end of that, 20%, we're talking 10% of the adult population of the United States trained to use their services. Now, the one that I did find was specific that they were going to invest $100 million of their own money into training people that don't work at Google on Google Cloud Platform. I'm sure there's similar numbers for all the other providers. But I had to search to find that. So it's not like they're making it easy for me to find that information, like they're making it easy for me to find that $10 billion data center they're building. They want everybody to know that they're spending the money on the centers and on the hardware and the technology, but not necessarily let everybody know that they're spending money to make the entire populace know how to use their services. So who does it benefit if 60 million people know how to use Google Cloud Platform? Does it benefit me as a cloud admin or a cloud engineer if I have to compete with 60 million people on how to configure Google Cloud services? Does not benefit me. Does it benefit Google? Yeah. Is it good or bad? I'm not here to say if it's good or bad. I'm just here to say vendor services are there for the benefit of the vendor. Now, they do help you and help us, help everybody if you use them in the right manner for your branding. You know, if you're wanting to become a cloud architect, make sure you properly use, for example, the AWS Solution Architect Professional certification if you want to become an architect. Now, maybe not the associate, but the professional or Azure expert or something along those lines. You know, if you're wanting to be, if you're wanting to be working DevOps, to get the DevOps one, but then you got to make sure you got the other stuff too that is not vendor proprietary. But I wanted to chime in here for a second just to talk about that because I'm the operations guy, I'm the business guy. I had the jaded mindset of everybody on this call right here, so I wanted to make sure that our audience thinks that way. They think in terms of who benefits from the certification, who benefits from a CCIE, the employer and the employee.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Who benefits from a TOGAF? The employer and the employee. TOGAF doesn't benefit. I mean, TOGAF benefits, but they're an open group. They literally, it's in their name, the open group. They make money from certification exams and memberships of the 900 organizations that are part of that. But that's just peanuts from an operational expense standpoint. Like that's same with how many people did you say have a CCIE, Mike?
About 65,000 over the last 20 years.
There's a big revenue opportunity there, right?
Yeah,
no.
Exactly.
Right? Like no, Cisco's not making money from that, but they are. I loved how you broke down what that does for the employer. That they're so, and it does the same to be said for AWS and Google and Microsoft. If you got preferred providers or preferred partners that work with, you mentioned Calent where Jeffrey worked earlier. They're an AWS, whatever the gold or platinum partner, whatever. But I guarantee you, it helps that they've got all these AWS certified people on there, mm-hmm. and that. So they're
I love the way
look at the certification.
You put it out there, and Chris, I don't want to take you off stage yet, but let's talk about it from a sales perspective. So now I'm over at Cisco or AWS, it doesn't matter. Remember how Mark talked about having the need to have the ability to have people be able to do the job? Mm-hmm. So now I'm there and I'm saying, I've designed your architecture. Here's to let you know. There's 1 million plus AWS certified people that are out there. To the employer, that says, wow, we can hire people. And it places the employer in the right side of the supply and demand curve. Yep. Mm-hmm. Chris brought it up, and Chris wants me to bring out my macroeconomics chart.
I did not want you to bring out this chart, but okay, we'll bring it out.
Chris, well, he didn't want me to bring it up, but if you know me, you're gonna, me, I'm the executive. So here's the thing. Let's say demand is given. If we increase demand, that for a given supply, that'll increase the price. But let's talk about it. On this axis, we have quantity. Okay. So as this line slopes down, we get greater quantities. The more people we have, the lower the salary will be. So we're the point of intersection between supply and demand. That's the price. So if we think about this, cloud practitioner, anybody's doing it. It's free certification for everybody, which means it's not really worth a lot. Now, you can have a cloud practitioner having a great set of skills and get any job you want.
That's what I was going to say. That's what I was going to say. So there's a whole nother aspect to this outside the certifications and the technology. And I'm going to love to, I hope to talk about that here in a few minutes.
And I want you to. So, here's your impact. But if all you know is certification, here's your salary. Now, guess what? You get 10 of these certifications, but they're all designed to do this. Your salary is still low. And this is where these freshers that get out of school, they do 5 and 6 and 7 associate certifications, and their salary is still low and they don't move. So then let's talk about, let's doing the harder things, the certification that's no one willing to do. It costs $15,000 to $20,000 to do a CCIE and a good year of your time. CCIEs like me were getting paid $200,000 a year 20 years ago. Why? Because Cisco gave you a big discount on your service and the tech didn't work in those days. So to have anybody that could figure it out, you could earn $100 an hour and work 60 hours a week back in 1999 as a CCA, which is $300,000 a year. Or you could take a good high-paying full-time job and look at that intersection. Now, when we get into these architecture careers, we're dealing with business acumen. I can't just hire an engineer and make him an architect. In fact, sometimes my biggest challenge with engineers is to get them to not be engineers anymore. Architecture and engineers don't have anything in common. It's kind of like a cat and a dog. Yes, they both have 4 legs. Yes, they both have fur, but they're very different animals. So now we reach in this. Now, in the architect world, you still need this level of technical knowledge, not how to do it, but how the systems work. Been an architect 25 years. I can tell you right now, I wouldn't know how to write a line of code, but I could get a job at any company you want inside of 15 minutes for $300,000 a year plus as an architect, because they don't want a coder. They want someone to design. But now you had business acumen, and you had leadership skills, and you had sales skills, and you have executive presence and communication skills, and of course you end up higher on the supply and demand curve. So as you do your certifications, as you do your planning, as you do career development, think about it. Do you want to be what everybody else has? Basically a cog in a wheel, a needle in a haystack? Or do you want to be something so bright? Do you want to be an ordinary house cat, or do you want to be a lion roaring? Well, I love cats, but I really want to be a lion and not the house cat. And I'd love to have a lion to protect all the house cats, because if I had space, well, I have space, it's just that I have allergies, but I would love to have more than one cat, Cindy. But that's neither here.
But
Do you mind if I add something just briefly to this whole
same as me, right behind Mark.
discussion? Everybody believes that certifications are there to get you the job. Now, I don't know how this fallacy started. I have no idea. But I have never, ever taken a certification. It doesn't matter if it's been in networking, if it's been done in data center, if it's been done in data center virtualization, even just virtualization in general. I've never taken a single one where it told me at the top, here you will learn all the skills that are required to get the job and be a productive member of the team. Not a single one.
Yeah.
So that's something you want to keep that in mind, that certifications and what is entailed in them are always designed with a specific end goal that could either be giving you a structure, basically a learning path on specific technologies that particular organization believes is necessary to be at that level. And then the other one is, of course, the vendor's marketing, right? Because the more people know their equipment or their implementation, whatever it may be, the more prevalent it's going to be on the marketplace. But none of that promises you a job. Never would get you job ready to begin with. So just keep that in mind. Certifications are great. They have a place. Some are more valued than others in the eyes of an employer. But just like me and Mike discussed last week, there's fantastic things on a certification like a Network Plus. Great things, great knowledge you can glean from that. But it just isn't viewed as highly as perhaps, let's say, a CCNP or something like that. So just keep that in mind. I just want to add a little tidbit.
All right. So before we let Alonso talk, let's go with the Ashish. Ashish joining us from India. I know he's ready to go to bed. AWS Cloud Admin
understand.
usually get the issues related to troubleshooting the issues. How can I learn and improve these skills? And how can I be an exceptional cloud admin?
And then, so I love that. And then the next thing that you said is you want to be a cloud expert, which is kind of the exact opposite of an admin. So let's talk about how to be an expert. Let's talk about how to be an admin, and let's talk about how to be great at each. We have to remember that the admin role is this hands-on technician role. And what do we mean by that? It's how to. So how do you be really great at how to? You practice it, you practice it, you practice it some more. So if I'm a cloud admin and I now know how to do it via the management console, and I want to be a cloud admin, then I want to get good at the CLI. And when I'm good at the CLI, I want to get good at infrastructure as code to kind of automate that. Now, if you're building stuff and it doesn't always work, you've got to get good at troubleshooting, right? Now, troubleshooting is about understanding what's normal and what's abnormal, or abnormal when I went to school, which means if you're going to be setting up anything, you have to know how it works. So while an admin may update a Linux kernel, and all of a sudden you're trying to compile a kernel and it doesn't work, if you really want to be able to troubleshoot it, you have to understand the Linux kernel. What is the point of the Linux kernel? How does it manage memory? Where do those drivers sit in, and how do they integrate between the hardware and the software? That's troubleshooting. Troubleshooting is knowing how it works. The problem is in an admin job, you're going to be tasked by how much you can build. And you're not typically going to have the time to do the judgment. That's an engineering job. So how do you get ahead as a cloud admin? You learn how systems work. You learn how to automate them. You get deep in your knowledge, and you get out of cloud engineering and cloud administration, and that puts you into cloud engineering. Because cloud admin is a technician role, and it's a good role, and it's an important role, and it's a needed role. But ultimately what happens is once you reach a certain point, there's just no up. And you've got to move into something different. Now, the next question you asked is, how do you be an expert? I promise you, you can't be an expert on cloud. You can be an expert on a domain in cloud, and here's why. Ashish, we got to find what you want. And as you develop your expertise, your opportunities will go up, your salary will go up. So Mark can spend the next 50 years mastering cloud networking and still have a lot to learn. Mm-hmm. So you've got to define what you want to be. If he wants to be a cloud network engineer versus a cloud network architect, they're completely different skills. And the more time he spends as a cloud engineer will teach him absolutely zero to being a network architect, and vice versa. So he's got to find what he wants. So let's say security, for example. You know, in security, we've got architects like me who design the security. We have security engineers who build the security. And then we have penetration testers who are paid to break in to tell me where the security holes are. We've got to define that. So if you want to be an expert in the cloud, what do you want to be an expert on? Do you want to be an expert on storage? Lots of opportunities in storage area networks. Do you want to be an expert in cloud security? You've got that opportunity too, but you've got to know exactly what you're trying to deal with. So I hope this makes sense. In order to get better in the cloud, to be a cloud expert, you got to figure out which part of the cloud. Databases are an area in the cloud. All of these things are there. And you know, here's your next thing. You said you're beginning, you don't know where to go. Now that's the sections. Now you got to go find yourself.
He already answered it. I have more interest in cloud security. Take that cloud and run with it.
Great. Okay, wonderful. So now we'll get you completely out of this cloud admin world because it has absolutely nothing to do with what you want to do now. Now you say security. So Ashish, now I got to ask you which one of the three branches of security. Do you want to design the security systems, present them and sell them like I do? Do you want to be the person that builds it, meaning building out the firewalls, the IDS, IPS systems? Or do you want to be the person that breaks in? Because now we've got three different subsets of security. So let's talk about all three. Let's say you want to be a security architect, and we've trained plenty of them. In fact, I just got someone, their first tech job ever. His name begins with an R, and I won't say the rest. He got a huge cloud security architect job as his first job in the office of the CISO. So first tech job, security architect. But what did he learn? He had to learn business. He had to learn business goals, business needs, business pain points. He had to give good presentation skills and how to give a presentation on his interview. He had to learn how to sell architecture, sell solutions. And then he had to learn how to deal with zero trust frameworks, NIST frameworks. He had to learn how to design secure demilitarized zones. He had to learn how to create an enterprise security policy, and we trained him. He had to learn how to build a business case around security. He had to learn what kinds of encryptions and when to use these kinds of encryptions in his security architecture. He had to learn whether to think about defense in depth and zero trust and when to use each. So that's going into his security architecture. We taught him more, but kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Now, let's say you want to be a security engineer. Guess what? Cloud security. Now you got to learn how to build this stuff. Now, I promise you 99% of cloud security will not be what's in an AWS Advanced Security. It's going to be enterprise-grade security tools, which means learning how to configure the firewalls from Palo Alto and Cisco and Fortinet and Checkpoint. It means learning how to configure authentication systems and how to design your authentication systems and make them work. Things like Microsoft Active Directory. It means getting good at configuring endpoint protection like host-based firewalls, anti-malware kind of systems in the cloud security engineering world. It's understanding of how to set up the access list and putting the access list and tuning them and locking down your servers, removing unnecessary services, for example, and putting on host-based firewalls, auth hardening, all those kind of things. That's security engineering. Now, let's say you want to be a ethical hacker. That's another form of security engineering where they break in and document the issues. Now you've got to learn about social engineering and how to get people to do things they don't want to do. Now you got to learn about Kali Linux tools and learn how to break into systems and learn how to create these buffer flow attacks and SQL injection attacks, how to break in. So you can see you've got these 3 wonderful cloud security careers, and they're all great. But you come in with you teaching me how to hack, and I want to hire you as an architect, and I need you to sell your $10 million solution in front of a board. You can't. You got to learn the architecture piece. So that's the key. So Ashish, if you wanted to, how do you start from the basics? You got to figure out which one you want to do. That's the key. You got to figure out which one you want to do.
So go read about each of the 3 or 4 areas of security that Mike just discussed about and see which one. Now that you've figured out that security interests you, figure out more about the security to see which of those areas interest you. And then it's like an onion. You keep pulling back. And it seems like, okay, so he point blank says security engineer. There you go.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Now that we know that, now let's think about what goes into security engineering. You will have to learn how to configure these security devices. Think training from Palo Alto, Cisco, Fortinet, and Checkpoint. They will teach you how to configure this stuff and how to build it. Think about getting a security certification like the CISSP, for example. It'll get you thinking like security. Now, once we get past that kind of stuff, now think about how to lock down operating systems. How do you disable unnecessary services? How do you set up your host-based firewalls? You've got to learn all these kind of things as the engineering side. How do you configure anti-malware systems? So think of the engineer as the how-to. So you're going to have to get training in all of these things. And there's lots of opportunities. Personally, I read about 3,000 books in the course of my career. I was an architect, so most of my books were on business. But in the engineering, it's about the tech. Go out there and read the vendor's documentation. Stay away from Medium. Go out there and read the sources by the expert. And then get hands-on, Ashish. Get yourself an EVE-NG server. Purchase the software licenses to run it. And get hands-on and build and build and build. And you do this all day for a year or 2 and you get good education, you're going to be there. But I hope we answered your question.
If you don't mind me adding something, Mike. So as an engineer, you're going to need to know how these things not are just implemented, but how they work. So for example, vendors have a lot of guides on how to implement particular features on their firewall. There's documentation. If you want to look at Checkpoint right now, they'll have Checkpoint has theirs, Fortinet has theirs, Cisco has theirs. So from that perspective, it's very easy to find a deployment guide and look at it. But if you want to be really good at something, and let's say we're going in an admin role or we're going the engineer. Unfortunately, if you're going to be exceptional at something like you wanted to, you're going to move into an engineering role to begin with. You're going to start learning the details of the protocols that are used for security. So very simple example, if you want to be good at creating encrypted tunnels. Most likely, when we're talking about IP, meaning the network layer, we're going to be talking about IPsec.
Yep.
So you're going to have to learn what are the different protocols and frameworks used to allow that type of establishment of secure tunnels. You're going to have to learn about a phase 1 tunnel, about a phase 2 tunnel, what it means to add security, integrity, and authentication. What are the different methods of performing authentication? Am I going to use a pre-shared key? Am I going to use the PKI, that infrastructure for digital certificates? If I do that, you'll need to learn what is a public, what is a private key. So you have symmetric keys compared to just asymmetric, right? Actually, asymmetric compared to symmetric if you do pre-shared. And then what you want to do, you want to get really good is build it, break it. Just break it on purpose and see how it reacts compared to when it's just normal. So that's one step. And then go research. Find what are common problems with this protocol. How are the different messages in phase 1 interpreted from message 1 to message 6? What is the difference between the messages in those compared to those that you get in the IPsec phase 2 negotiation, just the 3 messages? So that's what you can do, is to break it down. And a lot of times these vendors will have FAQs also on their website to give you common problems that you can kind of glean from and learn from and research. Why are the problems? Is this a design problem? Is this a bug? Is this a protocol? Whatever it may be, break it and then learn from that, including the actual implementation. So that would be my advice from an engineering perspective. Learn what protocols I use, how they work, break them, research common problems, and reverse engineer it. And that's how you're going to be great, not just at implementing, but more importantly, as you mentioned, at troubleshooting. Because troubleshooting means something doesn't work the way it should work. You want to know how it doesn't work? Break it on purpose.
And
All right.
we didn't mean to confuse you, Ashish. What we're talking about is all the things that are in security, which if you're just doing hands-on AWS things, it's going to sound completely foreign. And the reason it's going to sound completely foreign is it's 100% different than everything you're doing right now. And guess what? That's okay. I'm going to invite you to our webinar if you're interested, and you can ask more questions because it'll be live on Zoom and we can have a face-to-face conversation, because we're very limited in what we can do, and I truly, truly want to help you. But if you want to go from an airplane pilot to a physician, it's a brand new set of skills. Want to go from an admin to an engineer? It's a completely new set of skills. Want to go from an engineer to an architect? It's a completely new set of skills. So, Mark, it's going to leave me this question. You are an engineer in your career and you became an architect.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think was the biggest challenge going from engineer to architect?
Mindset.
Okay.
I would have to say mindset was the number one thing, because as an engineer, as I was explaining to Ashish, you focus so much on the details of things. And what I mean details is the technology itself. There's really rarely any business, if you're talking about, and let's say on paper, just you're a pure engineer. I'm not talking about they gave you a title of engineer and all of a sudden you're doing, network design or architect or something like that. Just pure engineer. You're never going to consider why the customer has the technology. Why do they need it? You're just going to be concerned with the fact in engineering is, okay, how do I configure it and does it work? I do my show command and there it is. But as an architect, it was the why. Always have to ask the why. Why does the customer need this? If I can answer that question, then I'm going to find out what are the requirements. And the thing is, and the reason I say it's a mind shift change, that's not always easy. I've had to go through numerous meetings, sometimes just to get something as simple as a business requirements and multiple people. Guess what happens? That's a frustrating process. And as an engineer, you fall back on what you feel comfortable with, and that's going to be the tech. So it's this constant struggle in your mind of trying to shift back and forward, seeing the whole picture compared to just seeing a facet of the entire picture. If you want to think of it like a puzzle, you can just see the piece, or you can see the entire puzzle, which shows you an image of whatever you're trying to put together. So that was, for me, the biggest struggle.
All right.
Aside from the numerous meetings.
Lay off the geekiness. All right, let's get back to the conversation at hand. All right, Ashish, please join us next week or if you're able to join us this Thursday, you're more than welcome to join us this Thursday as well. It's at 1 p.m. Eastern time, which is a little bit better for you in India than 2 o'clock, but it's also on Zoom. So we can come off mute and actually talk with each other. And it's a little bit easier than trying to deal with 200 character limitation for you on chat, and then us trying to interpret exactly where you stand. And it'll be a lot easier for us to help you out. And that's all we want to do, is help you out. So I wanted to bring up a part of this that a lot of people, there's always confusion. There's always confusion about, I have to have this to be able to do this. I have to have experience in this to be able to do this. I can't do this without having done that. And it from me, the outsider looking in, because I'm not the tech guy, it falls into that same category of, I got to have a certification to be able to do this. I got to have a certification to be able to do this. But what I think is important when we're talking here about the skills, the topic of the show is, what's the name of the show again? Which skills are you developing? Okay, all right, close enough. So if you're a cloud admin, you've got certain skills. If you're a cloud engineer, you've got certain skills. If you're a cloud architect, you have certain skills. Now, let's take that a step further. Let's add if you are currently a cloud admin, you have a certain set of skills. Yeah. If you're currently a cloud engineer, you have a certain set of skills. Does that mean that you don't use any of that experience and knowledge moving on to a cloud architect from the cloud engineer? No. You take what you need, you take what you can use, and you take what works for you, and you move it into your new career. Same with a cloud admin going to a cloud engineer. Yeah. There's going to be bits and pieces and parts. Let's just use Ashish for an example. 1.5 years as a cloud admin, guarantee you there's something in that 1.5 years of experience that he's going to be able to bring forward into an engineer role, or bring forward into the cloud architect role. But in the topic of today's show, are you developing the correct skills moving forward? So you're a cloud admin, you want to become a cloud engineer, don't develop the cloud admin skills anymore.
No.
Do not develop. If you're a cloud engineer and you're wanting to become a cloud architect, don't develop the cloud engineer skills any further. Now, that's not to say let them go to the wayside and be forgotten and never thought of again, but do not train to be a football player or a soccer player, whatever part of the world you're in, if you no longer want to be a football player or a soccer player. If you're wanting to move into basketball, do not train for football or soccer anymore. Train for basketball. It's the same with cloud architecture, going from cloud admin to cloud engineer to cloud architect. Or let's say somebody's been doing cloud architecture and they're like, look, I love the configuring, and I want to be a cloud engineer. Okay, stop focusing on the cloud architect stuff. Start developing your cloud engineer skills. Yeah. So there's no one size fits all to all of this. The one size fits all part is make sure you're developing the correct skills, whatever those correct skills may be, and use whatever you have from your past to benefit you as you move forward. So if you've got 8 years of engineering experience and you want to be an architect, find the gold in those 8 years of engineering experience, those 8 years of engineering knowledge, and take it forward with you. It will serve you in your role as an architect if you use it right, and if you find the right pieces to take with you. If you have no existing experience, then just make sure you're developing the right skills from the get-go. If you want to become a cloud architect, do not learn cloud admin. No. Now, learn the fundamentals, I guess, like the basics, like, okay, let's see, what is a cloud? All right. Do I need to know how to set it up? Do I need to know, maybe if it helps you learn a little better, learn it that way, but don't keep doing it that way. Like, if clicking and pointing and doing helps you learn, click and point and learn just enough to be able to learn and then move on.
May I just give them a practical example? Because we had it today in class. So we were talking about cloud connectivity options in class today. And I ended up focusing on virtual private networks. Now, the concept of virtual private networks is relatively simple. We're just trying to create an extension over a public network for our private networks. So in that sense, that wasn't the difficult part. But what we ended up focusing on was to add confidentiality to our VPNs. Because many people have this idea, when you go through a lot of other training, they'll tell you VPN automatically means encryption, confidentiality. That is not true. That has to be added to it. Now, I wanted to have our students a little bit more appreciation, go a little bit above and beyond. I actually demoed it up for them. We created a side-to-side IPsec VPN tunnel. We added the actual encryption on top of that. We discussed the actual parameters that are needed during the negotiation phases. And I did this all on Cisco routers. Now, I did preface it to our students. It is not necessarily important to understand if I'm typing in crypto ISACAM policy 10, what that means. That's irrelevant. What is needed, though, is to understand that we're using different frameworks to negotiate the parameters that are going to give us authentication, confidentiality, and they're also going to give us integrity and how we accomplish those things. The configuration was simply there to get to an outcome and be able to explain how the technology works. And then, just for a little giggle, we threw in there why we use it.
Just to be clear, that's an architect class, so that's why he said the configuring didn't matter. That's just an intro. For those of you watching, wondering why is he saying that doesn't matter, it's because it was for architects, not engineers.
It was an architect career, right? So, and I also told the students the reason I'm showing you this in depth. We did packet captures, packet analyzer. We showed them on the wire what it looks like, encrypted, not encrypted. But the reason I showed it them is to understand what this looks like, to give them a picture of it, not to understand at a packet level what the different messages are. That was irrelevant, right? Yeah. And then on top of that, I wanted to give them an appreciation why you need engineers, why you still need them as an architect, because you're not going to be doing that. You're not going to have to remember what the configurations are. You're not going to have to remember if it was a message 1 or 3 where the actual integrity was negotiated between the two peers. That's not the point of the architecture class. That leave up to the engineers. So that's just a practical example how we did it in class today.
Yeah.
So just want to add that.
And I love that. And I love that you did it on the Cisco routers for the following reason. You can see it there.
Yeah.
The whole point behind the cloud is you can't see it. It's hidden, and that's why it's a cloud. So I like that. I also like the concept of why you showed it so they knew, because as that architect, you need to know how that thing's negotiated. You don't need to know how to build it.
Nope.
There are people out there that have not been architects that think the architect is some technical domain expert. They're not. The architect is going to build a team in every single design. They're going to work with those engineers to get those intricate details, because that architect must focus on that business. Those engineers must focus on the tech. Otherwise, we get these disasters, which is 70% of the time where you got a techie doing a design, they don't focus on the business, they focus on tech, collapse, lost money, people get laid off and people get fired. There's no point for that. And that's why we need those significant separation of duties. It's like getting on an airplane. If I want to go learn Ashtanga yoga, I'm going straight to Mysore, India. It's the birthplace of it. If I want to learn, Eskrima, I'm going to go to the Philippines. It's where it's from. And if I want to learn to get a tan, I'm probably going to go to Miami and sit outside in the sun. But, the destination determines where you're going to go, your training plan, your goals. Over to you, Alonso.
Yeah, you guys have just been kicking out a lot. There were a lot of, my contribution has long since drifted down the current, but overall,
sorry.
But overall, that's as a way of jumping on, getting in the boat where we are and meeting everyone where they're at. Look at all of this as a diamond. The overall project, for it to shine, requires the facets. The facets represent the engineers. It represents cloud architects, generalists, cloud networking, cloud security, and so forth. We need every facet of that competency for the overall project to shine. So there's not going to be, like Mike reminds us, there's not going to be a one-man Rambo team that's going to solve everyone's solution all the time and know all the options and everything else based off of the business needs, requirements, how the market share is going for that specific competitor, and how they gauge against each other. There's no such person who knows everything about all stuff. So as all four of us have facets on the diamond of Go Cloud Careers, we all have our skill sets, our competencies to make this machine go round and round. So it's important for everyone to understand to choose a specific competency. Train for the job you want, not for the job you have. And also in reference to, I get a lot of conversations with people focusing on one cloud service provider and subsequent certifications. The more people that are focused on that certification, you know what that creates? A single point of failure. So if there's only a group of all these people focused on this specific certification, what about the other opportunities that you're missing? What about any of those negative implications of not understanding how business value can be leveraged more efficiently, more opportunities by other cloud service providers or agnostic approaches? So it's just important. It all circles back around. Don't focus on the certification, focus on the competency so that you'll know the benefits of a lot of these resources out there and the benefits of being a very competent and capable architect or enterprise architect.
You know, I had a thought enter my head, and you guys let me know what you think of this. So we're talking about skills. We're talking about 3 specific roles as it relates to cloud: cloud admin, cloud engineer, cloud architect. So if I were to take a single piece of technology, let's say a firewall, are there 3 ways that I can learn about the firewall for those 3 different careers? Like, are there things that I would learn as an admin that I wouldn't necessarily need to know as an architect, and vice versa? So that's what we're talking about here. That's what we're talking about here, about learning the skills, or learning the technology, or learning the domain appropriate for your domain. You know, security, learning about the firewall as an example. The architect is not going to necessarily know all the ins and outs of the firewall like an admin or an engineer would. But if they happen to, because they had 8 years of experience, it's not going to be hurtful. but again, if you're starting from scratch, there's no need to spend exorbitant amounts of time learning the administrative engineering configuration side of these technologies. But you do have to learn about this technology and how the technology works, the purpose of the technology, how it interacts with other technology, and how it's used or not used properly. So that's, and I know that's something that we get asked a lot is, are you saying that I don't have to know the tech? Or you're saying I don't need to have technical competency as an architect? No, that's not what we're saying.
No.
We say you learn it differently. You have to know it differently. You have to know it in a way that's different than the admin or the engineer, and vice versa. The admin and the engineer know it different than the architect. So I wanted to spit that out there.
I love the way you said that, Chris, and let's kind of extrapolate it. Let's take it out of tech, because only in tech do people think they're going to get successful by learning somebody else's job, and it never works for them. Let's say we've got a flight, an airplane flight, and we want to go between Palm Beach and Dubai. I've got the pilot that's going to set the flight plan, along with air traffic control, and figure out how to get there. And their goal is to get that plane there safely. Without the pilot, we got a problem, right? Now, what happens if mid-flight there's turbulence, which the pilot can't keep, and those flight attendants can't keep the people in their seats, seatbelted in? People get hurt, right? That means that flight attendant is very important. But keeping people in their seats and doing their seatbelts is not going to teach that pilot how to fly the plane. Now, we also have an airplane mechanic, which is kind of like the engineer that makes those engineers run. If those engineers run, the plane doesn't exactly fly so well with no engines. But no matter how much time you spend as an airplane mechanic, which is an engineer, it's not going to teach you how to fly the plane. And, in medicine, you don't see doctors trying to learn nursing and physical therapy. You see physicians doing physicians. It's in tech where you've got engineers that want to think that if they're going to learn engineering, they're going to be an architect. They're not. They're going to learn how to be an engineer, and that's okay, but they'll know nothing of architecture. And it's not wrong to love a career and want to do it, but the key is every minute you spend learning somebody else's job, you know what you're not doing? Learning yours. And what is the impact of that?
We need an engineer. We need an engineer to figure that out.
Yeah, Mark, I need you to help me figure this out. You've been an engineer more recently than I have been. Thankfully, I didn't spend more than 6 months as an engineer before I went to be an architect, so I didn't have to unlearn engineering.
We just need a 9-year-old kid to come figure it out for you.
Or we need a 9-year-old.
Like an admin kind of thing with Mac OS there.
Yeah, we need somebody that understands that.
Or Cindy. Yeah.
Actually, my cat Cindy, she'll run on the keyboard. She'll disable it for me because I don't know what else.
Somehow, yeah.
But that's the key. Focus on yours. I mean, if I want to be a weightlifter, every minute that I run, I'm going to decrease my strength, no matter how much weightlifting I do. From a health perspective, does it make sense to balance running and weightlifting? Maybe. But if I want to be an Olympic weightlifter and I'm trying to do a clean and jerk and a snatch, several hundred kilos, every minute I run is going to hurt my snatch or my clean and jerk. Is that okay? Not if I'm competing in the Olympics, not if I'm competing to be the best in the world. So it's about building your plan, making the plan follow your goals, and then following that plan.
I would also say this. Every person is a little bit different on how fast and how they learn something.
Good point.
So if your goal is to be an architect that focuses on the business side, and that's predominantly what we discuss here, what an architect truly means, not the certification way of an architect. You still will have to learn about the technology. You cannot apply a technology if you don't know about it, how it works, and what it is used for. Now, I'm going to be the first one to say, and it might sound a little biased because I have an engineering background. I sometimes need to touch it. I need to see how it actually is put together, how it works. I need to break it. I need to find a way that makes sense for me. So for me, this is individually, for me, how it works and what makes it go kaput. Others might be better. For example, Mike, he can read Sam Halabi's book on BGP infrastructure. And for him, how MED works, how ASPath prepending works, it might make sense just from a diagram and from the text he's reading. For me, I may have to lab this up, because if I'm going to recommend to a customer that this might be a way that we influence path selection on this particular protocol, that's how I learn it. That makes sense to me. So just keep that in mind. Architects, yes, you don't necessarily have to worry or be concerned with the tech implementation and building it, but how you learn it, that might bring you down that path. But don't go too deep, right? So that's what you want to focus on. Don't go down too deep and try to focus on, okay, for Cisco, this is this implementation. For Juniper, they use this type of programming language. Arista, or whoever didn't copy Cisco, they might have something different. How Fortinet does it compared to Checkpoint, and then luckily if you can peel away the weird marketing terms, you get the idea. It's going to be a little bit unique to you.
Yeah, I think that's an extension of the basic. It's basically an extension of the learning style. So it's basically that's like a kinesthetic learner, basically.
Yeah. There's people that can read about engines
versus a video, audio learning, or a visual learner, or a reading learner. There's plenty of people that learn by doing. But there's a difference between learning by doing and only learning by doing, or learning by doing, and not adding anything else to the equation and not leaving it at the door where it served its purpose. And then
I always tell people, what's your focus? Like, what's your end focus? If your focus is that you want to understand it, so that if you have a customer, that you can recommend the best choice, the best thing for what their business requires, that's what your focus should be. Your focus is not to remember the configuration and how it does. You know why?
Exactly.
Because what if I work for a customer and this customer never ever or let's say I now work for a customer and they require multicast. When was the last time I touched multicast? Like, I'm not going to remember the configuration offhand, but guess what? That's what Google is for. I go to Google and look it up. If I'm working on a Cisco router, how do I implement multicast? The difference is going to be, do I understand what multicast is used for and how does it work? Right? Do I understand that there's different version of PIM? When do I use IGMP compared to PIM between devices? What if I want to go across different domains? Right. So that's what I'm saying. The configuration is irrelevant, really. It's trivial at best. That's what I was trying to say.
All right. So let's do some questions.
Sure.
If anybody's got any questions, let's bring some questions in. So we're gonna go with the first one. So Hussein says, as I'm coming from a network engineering background, can you explain what the difference in study approach and understanding level like for OSPF, like timers and message? Jesus, this is Greek to me, guys. Like timers and message types, etc. Is that necessary? Hey, two networking guys on the bottom of the screen. Take that.
So we'll give you two perspectives. Hussein, I come from the world where my CCI number is 7417. To me, if you're going to design a network or performance tune it, you must understand everything. You must understand what a type 1 LSA is versus a type 2 versus a type 3 versus a 4, a 5, a 7, etc. And you need to understand that because when you design your architecture of how your routing is going to occur, and you're going to look at, okay, this one OE2 external link is going to come in and the link is flapping, and that's going to cause an SPF recalculation every couple of seconds. What's that going to do? So yes, you will need to understand deeply every message that protocol sends, especially if you have to fix it as an engineer. You will have to understand the entire protocol itself and understand why the hello timers and dead timers are what they are. So the answer is yes. Now, if you're an architect like me, you're not focusing on the engineering. You're going to find a guy like Mark, and I'm going to say, I want to use an OSPF network. I want to use a flat giant area 0 because I want to use it for an internet service provider, and I want to be able to run MPLS, and I need that LSA granularity, for example. And I'll design that, and then I'll think of my tag switching, label switching, and then get a genius like Mark and say, Mark, tell me about it. But now, if you're an engineer versus an architect, and you're going to go be working for a bank, and the bank's saying, look, I can't miss 4 hello timers before the systems converge because in 40 seconds of downtime, we'll lose $15 million. And many banks lose a lot more than that. Now you're going to have to understand how to performance tune those as an engineer. So as the architect, you need to understand how the protocol works, not how to configure it. I don't care if you have zero idea as an architect how to configure it, as long as you understand that protocol. And let's face it, I worked as a network architect for Night Securities, where right after WorldCom, I worked at WorldCom, then I was a network architect at Night Securities. Instantly, I was a principal architect at Comcast, and now Comcast, it's not just Cisco stuff, it's Juniper and Cisco. And then a month later, I'm a principal architect over at Riverstone using Riverstone networks. The good news was I didn't have to configure anything anyway. I didn't care how the stuff worked because I wasn't going to configure it, but it was the same OSPF. It was the same design standards, and I had to understand that protocol. Now, if you're an engineer and you're going to build it, the answer is if you want to do well in engineering, yeah, but I'm going to turn you over to Mark for the deep engineering stuff.
Yeah, so I would say as an engineer, you're less concerned about the overall design. And I'm talking about a typical engineer because there can be at times overlap. So if you look at a lot of these job posts and they want an engineer who also knows how to design. Those are not easy to find, but it will trickle it in and there. So if you're an engineer, you will still need to understand, because it's part of the protocol function of OSPF, what are areas used for? That's what you're going to have to understand. Yeah. But that may be only at a high level, because to you, you're mostly just going to need to know, how do I implement the configuration on my devices between the two areas, and what type of link state advertisements might go between the areas, which is intra-area, which is inter-area. That's going to be your biggest concern. Now, depending on what size of network you work in, what type of company, that type of knowledge might expand a little bit more, where you have to start learning about, how do I mitigate certain problems? I'm going to say, let me just shift my headset.
We can still hear you, Mark.
Okay. So,
well, not really.
Something such as a design. Somebody came up with a design they implemented a redistribution point from an outside network because some architect thought it was great and they didn't actually talk to you. So now you're sitting here and you're going to have to learn about, okay, if I, for example, have a stub area, I can't redistribute in a stub area. That doesn't work that way. Right. So I'm going to have to figure out what type of area can I use, and does OSPF even support it, to be able to redistribute these type of routes. And then you're going to have to start learning about, okay, if I have a LSA 5, if I have a 7 because of a not so stubby area, then I'm going to have to figure out how does that traverse over the areas, because guess what? Maybe a device in a different building, somebody came up with the idea that's going to be area 2, needs to communicate. How does that operation work between it? An architect is not really going to have to, at least not, let's say they're not a network architect, but just an architect, they're not going to have to concern themselves too much with those type of details. They're not going to have to sit to figure out what's the forwarding address, is the pbit set, is the pbit not set, how do I influence it, the 4 different ways that need to match so that you can even get the forwarding address properly. That's going to be irrelevant for them. That's what they have you for. So the fundamentals for both, the same. The depth, meaning at the packet level that you have to go to, is going to be more for an engineer. So technically, the engineer, pun intended, technically knows more about the protocol operations than the architect. The architect knows when it comes time for business to use it. Why and how? What are the options? Because he's going to have to figure out, okay, if I'm using OSPF, I'm solving a particular problem, whatever that problem may be. How do I apply it there? Then they come to you and ask you, this is how I want to solve it. Is that feasible? And then you guys get together and you discuss it. You might tell them technically it's not feasible because X, Y, and Z. So that's the difference there between these two. It's the depth that you're going to have to go into learning.
And such an expert answer. The architect is 50 to 80% business. The engineer is all tech. Mark is right. The engineer knows much more tech, and they need to. The architect focuses on the business, and they can go to the engineers and do every day for tech support.
All right. So our next question, I'll let Alonzo read this one so he gets some participation. We're gonna have to do our own show, Alonzo.
Oh man, they are having
talk about routing protocols next time.
They are having a ball. I'm just like let them have at it. So, but yeah, Cloud Station, hi GCC team. I'm just listening to the conversation and had to ask this question: why is it more difficult to transition from engineering to architect roles, despite the experience obtained?
It's a great one, Cloud Station, and I see it because, I take somebody that's never worked in tech and 10 months later they're working as an architect. I've got a great cloud engineer with 10 years experience and it takes me a year and a quarter. We all learn differently, Cloud Station, but here's the thing. If your focus your whole life is what's in front of you, which is the tech, and now you've got to learn a new skill and a new job, your focus and experience is going to keep making you look at the tech. And if you can take the tech lessons that you learned as an engineer, forget about thinking about like an engineer and immediately go to an architect, you'll be better off. But when you've spent your whole life doing something and now you got to do something else, but you've got years and years and years of habits in somebody else's career, the benefits that you gain in terms of tech depth can actually crush you if you can't change your focus. I had a student who's really smart and he's really capable, and he wanted to build his brand by building some help desk videos. And that's like putting physician dog walker hanging on the wall. People will see the dog walker is not the physician as soon as you put it there, but he's got the knowledge and the capability to do either. So the key is it's all about just changing your thinking from solving tech stuff to solving business issues. And if you can bring that engineering with you, great. If it sticks to you and it handicaps you, that's the problem. So anybody can do anything. There is no set path. That's the key.
All right. Next question. At your level, is there anything, I'm guessing this one's for Mike. At your level, is there anything else to learn? You have been there and done that. How do experts learn?
I don't know what happened to Chris, but how do experts learn? Well, Freedom Lands, I learn every day. The day I stop learning is the day I die. Things constantly change. But here's the thing. What you learn changes. When you're younger in the world, you're a little bit more focused on the technology. as you start your designs and you move up, you get focused more and more in the business. And at the end of the day, as you move up into your architecture career, it really comes down to people and process optimization. And here's what I mean by this. Let's say you're the best engineer out there. Great. You got 30 years experience and 5 CCIEs. Now, Mark comes in, he has a CCNA, but he now can command 150 CCIEs. Who's got the bigger outcome? The CCNA that can command 150 CCIEs than the person that's got more experience. So in my world, I constantly always am dealing with new technologies and what they can apply for business. I constantly work on my business acumen, my leadership skills, my executive presence in sales so I can make a bigger impact on my customer. And I collaborate with people that I respect, people like David Lithicum, who's got a lot more experience on the AI side than I do, for example. And he would come to me for like someone in the networking, and I know somebody else that's got more expertise in security, and we collaborate together, and that's how we all grow together.
All right. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
All right. Business development focuses on sales and business. Cloud architecture combines tech and business. Is a cloud architect more suited for transitioning to an enterprise architect?
A cloud architect with more business acumen and a higher focus is an enterprise architect. And that can turn into a chief architect, which is kind of like a chief information officer. Every executive position is an architect position in some way, shape, or form.
All right. So this one asking for you to share some insight for everyone else. Thanks for the valuable content. I'm a senior engineer, so I'm always bombarded with engineering thinking for most of my days. So these are always refreshing. For everyone else, can you share some insight on branding, creating content as an architect?
Yes, and Alonzo and I are going to answer this question. And architecture is a strategy position. So if there's a new technology, what can that new technology do for the business? Not how to configure it, not how to, what can it do? What can generative AI do? What can generative AI do for an airline? What can it do to help them with their fuel pricing? What could it do to potentially calculate airplane, the vectors and the path for the flight? Think about it that way. So if your brand needs to be consistent. Dr. Dog Walker. Mm-hmm. Here's what people see, Dog Walker. If I tell you right now I'm a CEO and an enterprise architect, you know what you're going to hear? Enterprise architect, and you're going to lose the CEO. Mm-hmm. And that's okay, because I love being an architect so much, I don't really care if people think of me as an architect. It's my life's work, and I love it. But that's the key. So the content you need to create needs to be architecture. It needs to be solving business problems. It needs to be the application of technology, and it needs a thorough analysis. These are our choices. Choice A gives us this benefit and this loss. Choice B gives us this benefit and this loss. Choice C gives us this. And showing the analysis and thought. So let's turn it over to Alonzo, who's a marketing executive.
Absolutely, Burnett. One thing that I also, along with all this knowledge that Mike has shared, also know your audience. Know who you're speaking with. Know why you're going to be providing this content. Who's it focused on, and how are you going to create business value for them, as Mike mentioned. So it's ironically, when it comes to engineers, you guys are communicating in a language. You're using Python, Linux to communicate on the command line. However, as a cloud architect, enterprise architect, we're dealing with people. There's variances in code that you all work with to meet specific needs on the command line. We're talking in different ways to talk to the CEO, CEI, CISO, chief financial officer, and speaking in a way that they can understand, appreciate, and be able to leverage and position what you're trying to bring across in a way that's going to be valuable to them. Ergo, when it comes to you focusing on your content, who are you trying to speak with? Are you speaking with engineers who are trying to transition into becoming architects, or vice versa? I've seen it happen. So making sure that you're able to understand search engine optimization, understand what you're looking to solve, as opposed to just sharing information. Talk about how it's meeting business need. And one of the things that we talk about here is don't regurgitate what's already been dropped into this specific post. Talk about what it's not talking about. Provide an agnostic approach to what you're saying. Never have any particular allegiance to anyone any particular cloud service provider, tech, or otherwise. So providing business value on an agnostic level is going to be a strong key to you being successful in creating content.
All right. So we got a two-parter coming up, and this is going to be our last question, and then we're going to wrap up the show. I want to thank everybody for joining us. So let's do this. Again, it looks like this one is from Hussein, our network engineer. Recently, I've shifted to a pre-sales role, and I'm thinking about going with CCDE, but I'm kind of still seeing it necessary to understand the engineering stuff as an advisor for customers. They're saying that as most of the customers are asking to provide technical advice and help them on their design. I have some outside perspective from a non-techie input. Can I add it before you guys?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So my 2 cents, without any experience of engineering, technology, networking, anything. The reason they're asking that for you is because they know you have it. And that's what they know you as.
Yes.
You have to change your people, places, and things if you want to change your perspective of yourself or change the way you dress. So,
but you know,
did we lose Mike or did I lose Mike?
I think we all lost Mike.
So, Mark, we'll start with you here while we wait for Mike to reconnect.
So I'm going to make a couple of assumptions here. If you're asking about a CCDE, that means either you researched it and found that this might be one of the only learning paths available to you to learn anything about network design, or you're technically skilled enough to know that you need to eventually go for your Cisco Certified Design Expert certification, because it is the bonding agent between an engineer and eventually what will be considered an architect. So I'm going to go from this perspective. If you're going in a pre-sales role and your technical skills are pretty good and they span wide, because you're going to need wide skill set for the CCD, because the CCD is going to cover your routing, your switching. It's going to as well cover security. So you're going to have to learn the different flavors of VPNs. It's going to be heavy on service provider networks. So you're going to have to learn those parts of the technology. It could be segment routing. It's usually pretty heavy on MPLS. And it's heavy also on data center and virtualization. And then, of course, we have software-defined networking. So that's sprinkled in there as well. Those are going to be covered at a high level. But if you know nothing about any of those domains, let's say you're only good at routing and switching, you're going to have to learn about all the other domains before you can ever consider it. Let's say, though, you are relatively okay in most of these. You know a little bit about something about all of them. And you're not a company. They don't deal in data center. They don't deal in service provider. I would tell you is don't bother with the CCDE unless it will help you get more money. What I would rather focus on is what you say, pre-sales. I will focus on the skills that will improve my sale ability, my skills in sale. How do I prospect customers appropriately? How do I ask them questions? How do I get them to understand the value that this solution that I'm presenting to them is going to bring to their organization? So you're going to be more now geared towards the business side of things again, in those particular skills. If the other is true, you're going to have to get more technical skills, because the CCD is still quite technical, because you're going to have to know a breadth of different domains. But that's my take on your question: is steer towards the business skill, learn the sales, learn how that works.
Yeah, and apologies, my internet went out. It took some time for my router to switch to my backup internet service provider. So, here's the thing. First, there's multiple kinds of architects. There's the network architect, the cloud architect that can focus on the business side. And they're going to earn the most. I'm going to tell you right now, the closer you are to the business, the more you will earn. There's also something called the technical architect, which isn't an architect all. They used to call them design engineers. And these are the people that are going to go in there and, they're really a pre-sales engineer or a sales engineer. And they're going to go in there, consult, and they may still touch the technology because they're kind of that hybrid role. And I know if you're an engineer and you're taking on pre-sales, whether you're a sales engineer or you're a technical architect, it's kind of the same job. But at the end of the day, if you move up into a network architect or a bigger architect role, it's going to be much more about your business acumen. It's going to be much more about your leadership, more about your executive presence, more about your ability to obtain requirements. I'll tell you what happened to me at Cisco. My manager, who was a VP, because I reported directly to a VP at the level of architect I was, said, Mike, could you remove some of these certifications off of your business cards? He said, I don't want to see your CCIE. I don't want to see your CISSP. He said, because when I put you in front of the CEO, they're going to see you as a techie, not as an executive. So please remove your tech certifications. Now, does that mean I don't love my CCIE? Yeah, it was a hard 6 months that I spent learning it, and I learned a lot. Is the CCIE a good certification? Yeah, it's a phenomenal one for a technical architect, and I can definitely recommend it. But you probably earn double if you focused on your business acumen, your leadership, your sales skills, your executive presence as a sales engineer or as an architect than getting an MBA than you actually would doing the CCDE. So you're going to have to make the determination, and neither path is wrong. Do you want to be more businessy and be able to influence more buying decisions and convince more customers to change their business with tech? That's one path for you, and it's a good path. Or you could focus on the more technical side of it and love the tech. Both are great. We need both. We can't survive without both. The key is knowing what you want and focusing on all the things you can do to get there. Want to be an airplane pilot? Don't practice being an airplane mechanic. Want to be an architect? Don't practice being an engineer. Want to be an architect? Please don't do administration roles. And don't build your brand around things that are not related to your job. That's the key. You're an architect and you get 5 associate certifications, you're giving me technician work. And I don't want a technician, I want an architect. Likewise, you want to be an engineer.
Unless your employer incentivizes you to do it.
Right, and pays for you to do it.
Yes. Sometimes your employer would like to say, we have X number of certified people, because it makes it easier for them to sell a consulting engagement. So if they're going to go pay you 10 grand to do a certification, and they're going to send you to the boot camp, and sometimes they will, and they're going to send you for a week boot camp so you can do a certification, and you're going to go out and have some steak and lobster and scotch and good wine, entertain yourself and enjoy it, go do it. Please do it. I've done it.
I want everybody to go on LinkedIn over the next week and just pay attention. See how many people are currently working as an architect or an engineer and put out there that they just got this certification. They got this certification. It's amazing how many people that have been working in roles for years are getting a certification. Guaranteed the employer had something to do with that one.
Often. Cisco used to give until I reached an executive role, Cisco gave us a bonus to recertify on our CCIEs.
That's how I got my MBA. Yeah, make the employer pay for it.
So really what we're talking about understanding what we do as cloud architects versus cloud engineers versus admins, cloud admins, network admins. We're talking about figuring out what you want to do. Hey, wait, isn't that architecture? Figuring out what the end goal is. And then once we know the end goal, then what do we need to do to get there? It's building that plan. And then it's just executing on that plan. I love being an architect. It's been my life's work. Yes, I went to school for 7 years, learned to practice internal medicine. And as soon as I switched to networking as an architect, I don't think I've ever worked a day in my life. So, that's really what we're talking about. So we talked about today about how to understanding the difference, the skill set of the difference. We talked about certifications and why they can build, which ones build your brand, which ones increase your salary. We talked about which ones are more commodity certifications, so vendors can say there's lots of certified people out there. Don't worry, you can hire people. And we talked about how to build your life. So I'd like to thank you if you're there. MBAs, Hussein, is always a good thing. I did mine, and it made a biggest difference in my life. It doubled my salary over at Cisco after I did my MBA, no matter how long I had it. So it's all about finding what you want and building the brand about what you want. What is that end goal? And work backwards. How do you innovate? You figure out what you want to do and you work backwards. How do you design an architecture? You figure out what the end business goal is and you work backwards in terms of people, processes, and technologies to solve it. Want to be a better engineer? Think about what problem you have. So I hope we enlightened you guys today. Chris will buzz me if I don't remind everybody that we have a 50% sale right now, site-wide on every project. So for less than 2 days pay, the average for our average graduate, you can get your first cloud architect job. Join us on Thursday on the completely free How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job webinar. It'll be on Zoom. If you've got questions about other careers, I don't care. I'll answer them too. Just want to help you get to your goals. And download the free guide on how to become a cloud architect. All free, all to help you build your career. Thank you so much, everyone. I look forward to seeing another one.
Thank you for allowing us to geek out a little bit, everyone.
Yeah, me and Alonzo are gonna have to go talk about getting our own show now. We're gonna, you guys took over. Thank you.
Maybe you guys
everybody.
do your own show, and Mark and I get a geeky show periodically. I don't mind geeking out every once in a while. It makes me feel young.
All right. Well, we'll see everybody tomorrow on the YouTube Q&A. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for joining us.